If you want to turn bowls on the lathe using a two-step method where you rough it out green, let it dry in a paper bag, and then bring it back to the lathe to turn it back to a round state and finish it out, you need a way to deal with the elongation that has occurred during the drying process on your tenon. So it's not safe to just mount that elongated tenon back into a four-jaw chuck, particularly on a big bowl like this. On a small bowl, you might get away with it just fine. On a big bowl, it's going to only grab onto two sides of that tenon, and there's going to be a tendency for that to wiggle loose and fly off during the turning process, which is a really unsafe situation. So the way that you want to deal with that is with what is called a donut chuck. And this is a chuck that allows you to slide the bowl in by removing one of the bolts, slide it into position, extend the tenon or recess through the hole in the donut, and then tighten it down really super tight, centering that as much as you can, and then you're in a good position to securely spin that bowl and return the tenon to a round state. Now you're ready to take it back, put it on the four-jaw chuck, mount it on the lathe, and proceed through the process. So I'm going to walk you through step by step how to build one of these. It's a super easy project. It's worth every penny and every minute that you're going to put into it, so I hope that you'll give it a try.
First thing you want to do is verify the height of your spindle off the lathe bed. Mine is 12 inches. With a swing of 12 inches, I'm going to make the jig 23 inches to allow a ½ inch of clearance all the way around. So I cut two pieces of 3/4 inch Baltic birch plywood to 23 inches square, and I drew diagonals from corner to corner in each direction. Then I used a beam compass to draw a circle 22 inches in diameter, centered on the piece, and that circle where it intersects with the diagonal lines is where I'm going to put the bolt holes. Next, I ran a couple 1¼ inch screws into the outer perimeter of the wood to keep it from shifting during cutting. Make sure it's out by the outer perimeter. Then I used a circle jig on a bandsaw to cut out the shape. You could do this on a handheld jigsaw if you don't have a bandsaw. Then I used a Forstner bit to mill a 1/8 inch deep recess at each intersection point of my diagonal lines with the circles. This will be to conceal the bolt heads. Then I used a drill bit to drill my through holes for the bolts. This was just slightly larger than the 3/8 inch bolts that I used. Then I drilled a hole through the center all the way through to the other side, making sure that I was drilling completely straight, and this will help me locate the faceplate. Faceplate is installed with some steel screws. Use good ones, not sheetrock screws. Then take the donut chuck over to your lathe and spin it onto the spindle. Then use some 60 or 80 grit sandpaper to true up your jig. If you're really out of round here, go ahead and grab a lathe chisel and true it up. Next, you're going to mark for a circle that's going to be removed to expose the bottom of your bowls. I went with 8 inches based on the size of bowls that I turn, but you can go bigger or smaller based on what you're going to turn. Then you're going to remove that circle using a parting tool. It's a good idea to number each bolt location so that you can put it together easily if you ever take it apart. Next, take some 1 inch outside diameter PVC tubing and wrap it around the inner perimeter of the jig. This would have worked a lot better if I would have made the slit along the outside of the curve rather than the inside of the curve. So I had to make some relief cuts to get it to bend properly. I also heated it with a heat gun a little bit. And it was ultimately it got into position, but it would have been easier again to slit it on the outside, I think. The PVC prevents the bowl from slipping and getting marred. Then I shot a few 1 inch staples to hold it into place. Then I slid a 3/8 inch lag bolt through each hole and attached with a washer and a wing nut on the other side. I use bolts that are 8 inches long, which work well for the bowls that I'm normally turning. You can use whatever length bolts make sense for yours, or have a couple sets of bolts on hand for multiple sizes. With 3 bolts installed, just slide the bowl into position, center it, and then install the 4th bolt. Then bring the chuck with the bowl in it back over to the lathe and spin it back onto the spindle. Next, give it a good spin and make sure you've got clearance on all sides of the jig. Now's the time to find out if you have an alignment problem rather than when you turn on the lathe. Next, you're ready to test out your new jig. Bring it up to speed slowly. With a jig this size, you don't want to spin it faster than a few hundred RPM.
All right, that's all there is to it. I told you up front it was simple. It definitely is. Hope you'll give this a try and put it to work in your shop. Let me know if you have any questions, and hope you subscribe to the channel for more DIY woodworking and wood turning videos.